In 1788, Bonaire was born along the Salmon River, Idaho. She was part of the Shoshoni tribe. In 1803, Bonaire was taken by the Hidatsa warriors and was traded for a gun to Toussaint Charbonneau to be his woman. In 1805, Bonaire, now Sacajawea, and her husband meet Meriwether Lewis and William Clark and join their expedition. In 2003, Jane Fitzpatrick, after a spiritual encounter, starts writing a book about Sacajawea. In 2005, Jane Fitzpatrick, after having a conversation with her daughter, starts writing a screenplay about Sacagawea's life. She wants to tell her story. Please join me in this inspiring conversation with Jane, who tells us why it is so important to her to share the story of Sacajawea and why she feels that the whole world needs to know her story. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.
Today, having a seat at the table is Jane Fitzpatrick. Jane is many things. She's an executive producer, writer of the Moondrake series. She's an advisory board member with PASA, Tree of Life. She's an executive producer, writer with Broken Hand Productions. She's the author of the Embrace book series, owner of the Spirit Wind collection, executive producer, writer with Spirit Wind Films, and of course, and that is actually what our conversation will be about today, she is the executive producer, writer of the Sacajawea movie. Jane also won a few awards. The Sacajawea, the Windcatcher, recently received the highest award from 2 film festivals, winner Best Historical Script, Ona Ross Film Awards, and winner Best Feature Script Portland Screenplays Awards.
Yes.
Oh, Jane, that's quite an achievement. Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with me today.
It's wonderful. Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's start with your spiritual connection with Sacajawea. Can you tell us in short why you were, or why are you so drawn to Sacajawea? Why is she such an inspiration to you? What is it with this little girl a few hundred years ago that is so, that you are so drawn to?
Well, the answer would be it wasn't expected in my life. I didn't expect for this to come my way. But growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I knew about Lewis and Clark and Sacajawea. And basically, I knew what most people know is that she was with the Lewis and Clark expedition. She carried a baby on her back, and she was able to communicate with the Native Americans as they went on their trek. And that's what I knew about her story. And it was always in the back of my mind, always, part of my experience. What was interesting, though, is later I realized this, but I guess as part of my connection, there was some kind of a spiritual element that I didn't realize as a child. I was born in Richland, Washington, which was right along the Columbia River where the expedition came through in 1805. My parents named me Janie, which was the name that Clark gave to Sacajawea because he couldn't pronounce her name. And we had very close friends back then named the Brattons, and they were descendants of William Bratton, who was on the expedition. So that was kind of like, you don't think that's unusual or anything. It's just the way I was growing up there. Eventually, we moved to Portland, Oregon. And my friends in high school there were Cliff Lewis, John Clark, and Jane Scott, which to me, and again, I didn't put it together. I didn't think of this as any association with Lewis and Clark. It was just because everybody knew about Lewis and Clark. It was kind of cool that these guys were Lewis and Clark. So life went on. I would go to the beach where she actually had been, where they ended up at Seaside and Cannon Beach area, and would go there almost every weekend with my friends. And still, I think what was brewing was something inside of me to awaken me in the right time. to do this story, but it wasn't that time yet. So life went on. I married my husband, and we ended up in Montana, of all places. We were traveling through, and our car broke down there, so we just decided to stay. And he was a teacher. And so one Friday in 1989, we went to Fort Rock, to the headwaters of the Missouri River, which is at Three Forks. And I went with him. He took his kids, his class there. And there was something there. I was so moved by that place that the next weekend I told my husband, I need to go again, and I need to go by myself. And he understood that. He was always supportive of me and what I wanted to do in my life. And I went and I sat on Fort Rock. I looked out. There were eagles flying above me. And there was something that was drawing me to this place, because this was the very place where Sacajawea was taken from her Shoshoni people by the Hidatsa warriors and kidnapped. Had that never happened, she would never have been on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And so it was really an experience that later I realized the importance of. While I was there, I'm sitting on this cliff. I know in my heart and my soul, I want you to write my story.
That's what you heard.
That's what I heard. And so I went back home and I started writing it. And I wanted to write it as a children's book. I thought this, but as I got into this story, I realized this is not a children's story. I had written 3 chapters. So I put it away in a box, and we eventually ended up moving to Washington State, back home. And in 2003, I had begun a few years earlier a kind of a spiritual awakening in my own life that was separate from this story. But in 2003, my daughter Jera was going to go to film school down in California. And she knew about the story that I had started writing. And she said to me, Mom, you really need to take that story and write it into a screenplay. I didn't know how to write a screenplay. I had no idea what I was doing. But I went out into the shed and I started looking through boxes, and I find my story. So I bring it in. I don't know how it all came out the way that it did, but I started with a timeline across the wall in my dining room, and I put on it all the places, a card that said all the places where Lewis and Clark talked about Sacajawea, something she did, because they actually did talk about her in the journal. And there were 12 places, only 12. And so I put those along the timeline from the Hidatsa village to the ocean. And that's where I began. And I would back up from that, what they said, and create a scene that would make them say that, and would just kept going along. Of course, they weren't in any continuity at that point. It was just scenes and what they said, scene and what they said. And that was the beginning of it. There was so much history, so much to go through. I realized that I had to focus on the Lewis and Clark journals, because there was a lot of controversy, a lot of passion around what happened and who she was, that I had to just align myself with the journals, because they were the ones that had a firsthand connection with her. Okay, so that's what I did. And one day I decided to go to Barnes & Noble, to the bookstore, to get some information. I was going to get actually a copy of the journals so that I could write in it. And so while I was there, I was overwhelmed really with all the history and trying to find her story, not the men's story. There's lots about the men, but very little about her. And so I'm in Barnes & Noble, and I come across a paperweight that was sitting there. It was just drawing me, and I grabbed it and I looked at it, and it was a Michelangelo quote around this paper. And it said, "I saw the angel in the granite, and I carved until I set him free. And I literally just lost it right there with tears coming down my face, because I see her story in all this massive history and the men and everything that was happening. But I just had to keep carving to set her story free. What was it? Through her eyes. And that really sent me to a different place in what I was writing. It began to find a continuity between her story and the history, and a woman, a Shoshoni woman, and what she would think and feel, and a mother. And so it all began to come together. And that's really the connection and how I began to start this endeavor.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing story. Yeah, because she was taken by the Hidatsa warriors.
Yes. I guess part of her story is that as a little girl, 12 years old, she was just, and the script is, this is the beginning of the script, where the Shoshoni tradition is to go away from the tribe for 3 days. A little girl, 12 years old, just became a woman. And in that time, she prays, she burns the smoke, she does ritual, she makes gifts for the people of importance in her life. And then she's expected to come back home, find her way back to her people, which she knows because she has a horse. And then when she gets back to her people, after those 3 days, they have a ceremony with the women, the mothers, the grandmothers. And it's a beautiful ceremony. I won't go into it because I want people to see it in the movie. But after the ceremony, she goes down by the river to wash the paint and the dust from her face and hair. And that's when the Hidatsa warriors attack. They take her and her friend Nyanuki and other children, her other family members. And now she has this long trek to get back from Montana area to North Dakota by walking. She's a slave basically when she gets back there. That's part of the story. That's her story before the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Yeah. And then Hidatsa warriors, they trade her.
At their village, their Hidatsa village along the Knife River in North Dakota, they trade a lot with the French-Canadian trappers and that come down. And so there's a lot of, that's how they have guns. And the Shoshone didn't have guns. That was one of the issues. And one of the trappers' names was Toussaint Charbonneau. And he was an older man. So Charbonneau trades her for a gun. And he has another wife. Her name is Otter Woman. And she is also Shoshone, but she was taken when she was a baby. That was the difference. But she's older than Sacajawea is now.
Yeah.
Actually, by the time she ggets traded, I think she's about 14 or 15. Now Charbonneau has 2 women, 2 wives, and that begins her time. Basically, that took her out of slavery in a way, because now she is a wife of Charbonneau. So it was better for her in some ways. But of course, she ends up pregnant. And she is pregnant when the Lewis and Clark expedition comes to the Hidatsa village in about November of 1804. And that's when they meet.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the Clark and Lewis expedition, the history behind the expedition, the reason for this expedition. So I found something on the internet and I would like to read it to you. And if it's not correct, please feel free to correct me. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Lewis was the personal assistant to President Jefferson. 4 July 1803, President Jefferson announces that the U.S. bought a piece of land of 825,000 square meters from the French.
Yes.
So this piece of land was mainly inhabited by Native Americans.
Yes.
The only problem was that no one had seen this land. So President Jefferson asked Lewis, his assistant and right hand, at the time to visit and to explore the land.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Also, one of the goals was to improve the relationships with the different tribes. And although they got a lot of support, they were also surprised that there was so much resistance. And then there's the expedition itself, of course. Can you tell us something about the expedition, the role Sacajawea played in it? And also, what I also would like to know is why, that's another question, but why do you think Sacajawea has become such a huge icon for so many women? So let's start with the first question. Can you tell us something about the expedition and the way Sacajawea got involved?
Well, okay. So at the Hidatsa village, when she was just going to have her baby in February of 1805.
Mm-hmm.
In the spring, they were going to leave and go on this trek to the Pacific Ocean, and to find a trade route to the Pacific, and find out what was beyond the continental divide. Really, they were going all the way to the ocean. That was their plan. I often wondered why they took pirogues and a keelboat up the river, that they didn't take horses. But they found out from the Hidatsas that you can't get over the mountains. They thought there might be a water route to the Pacific and down so that's what they were thinking. But they found out that they were going to need horses. Mm-hmm. Well, Sacajawea, upon hearing this from the script, realizes that this is her way home.
Yeah.
Because her people, the Shoshoni people, have horses. Mm-hmm. They have many, 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 many horses. And so she wanted to go on this expedition. She needed to go on this expedition. Her husband was very arrogant and just full of himself, I guess you'd say. And so she knew, she could manipulate maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about what happened with this, but as the story goes, she convinces that he is needed as an interpreter. She knows Shoshoni. She knows Hidatsa. She knows French. So he doesn't know English very well, but he does know Hidatsa. They can communicate then to French. And then there's a French interpreter on the expedition. So they knew that they would have a line of communication when they got to the Shoshoni people to get horses. And so this is why she was brought on the expedition. And so even though she just had her baby in February, and Lewis was extremely against taking her, but he took a chance with it because of the need to get these horses. So.
Yeah. So that's how she got involved. What I found striking was the huge amount, when you read the story, the huge amount of respect that Lewis and Clark have for Sacajawea.
Yes, they really did. And there were no problems with the men with Sacajawea. And she had a character that demanded respect. I just felt like she was her own person, even at that time. Even though she was a woman in 1805, where women, let alone Native American women, were not held that way. We're not held with respect. But they gave her so much respect, and I think Clark was very protective of her, and she was important to them. There were other times along this trek that she was called upon to speak to the Native American people that they encountered, because there were certain words that were similar among the people there from, the the Flathead people, the Nez Perce people, and then even farther down the Columbia River, there were ways of communicating that she had that they would never have had. And just the fact that a woman was on with these men gave these tribes a feeling that they come in peace. And this was something I wanted to point out in the story, because she wore paint across her forehead and down her side of her head, and she had down in the part of her hair. And I always thought that this was such a beautiful meaning to this, and I incorporated it in the story. When Clark asked her, into the journey, asked her what this means. What do these markings mean? And she said to him that the markings mean that we come in peace. Now, he realized in that moment that she was wearing this paint and that all the Native American people that they came across knew what that meant.
Yeah.
And they had not been attacked. They had been, there were a few tense times, but they were not killed. And I believe that he knew they would have been killed without her with them. And she did lead them to the Shoshone people. She saw the Beaver Head Rock, which she knew that was near the summer camp of her people. And so it certainly was, and they found them. So
yeah. And then she got home. Yeah.
Yes, she got home.
Yeah.
So,
and she wanted to go home to stay.
She did. Some of this is, there are differing opinions about this, but I could not imagine a person who was taken from her people, and especially had a betrothed who she loved, and with a way to get back home. And so when she got there, she wanted to stay, but she did not stay because it was not that the chief would cause any problem with that. That would be her decision and her betrothed's decision. But the decision was that she could not stay. And she was married to the white man. She had a child. And this was her great disappointment.
Yeah.
And so she had to continue on.
Yeah.
But Lewis and Clark would have let her, that wouldn't have they wouldn't have been upset if she wanted to stay. These are her people.
Yeah. Yeah. Something completely different. Back to the script. Because you talked to the Shoshone people, people of the tribe of Sacajawea. And you had, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a draft of the script. You wanted them to read it, and you wanted their endorsement.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Why? Why was their endorsement so important to you?
Because I respect her people. I respect Native Americans. And I did not expect to be feeling like I had been asked to write this story I'm a white person.
Yeah.
So I just always want to put that respect out in front of me. I'm humbled. I'm truly grateful for their input, their willingness to see the story coming through my brain, which I wanted, it's really hard to explain it. I guess something that would explain it was one day I was sitting at my desk and I put my head down on the table and I was just crying like, why am I supposed to write this story? I felt like I was. I just don't feel worthy. I don't feel worthy. I don't know how I can do this. This was in the middle of writing it. And I looked out my window. It was an upstairs window. And just then an eagle flew right across the window. And it was like the words, just like on the Fort Rock words, I could hear, get out of the way. Don't worry. Get out of the way. And that is what I felt. I knew I needed to go to her people. I knew that I had to say, here's my rough draft. If there's anything that I have said that is not true, not right, please tell me. I'm here for you. I want to do this for you. And if you want me to. And my liaison, Leo Airwhite, I had interaction with him through the internet before I went to the Shoshonis the first time. And he was so thrilled that I came, and I was so thrilled that I had him. I was invited back. I went back the second time. He said to me, Jane, he said, there is one thing that we want to share with you. And it is the fact that in the journals, the Lewis and Clark journals, when Sacajawea met her people, Cameo, the chief, was noted in the journals as her brother. That is the traditional understanding. That is the Lewis and Clark people's understanding, which they told me. I went to see them as well. And yet Leo told me in their tribe or with their people, they are all brothers and sisters. But on the lineage, Cameo was her uncle. And so he explained to me that in their culture, the uncles are very important to the raising of the children, to uncles and aunts are very important, and mothers and fathers and, but the brothers and sisters are on an equal. So there's a different relationship that now Sacajawea has when she gets back to people. It's her uncle that is the chief and recognizes her. It's an incredible moment that's recorded in the journals of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And the fact that it's her uncle and what he says to her and how he blesses her child and how, all the things add up differently when you realize. But now I had a decision I had to make because the Lewis and Clark people are very adamant about it being her brother. And I decided after much prayer and meditation on it that this story is through her eyes, not through the men. And her people are saying that Cameo is her uncle, that I must do that.
Yeah.
And I know I will probably get flack from that, from the Lewis and Clark, from the historians, and I understand it. But this is Sacagawea's story, and it is going to be told through her eyes. And I had to get out of the way, no matter what I thought. Okay, but it really did make a difference to the story and how it would unfold. So that's what I did.
That's what you did. Yeah. So tell us, did you get the endorsement?
I got the endorsement. I absolutely, 2 years it took to get it.
Oh my, 2 years.
And finally, it's beautiful. It's on our website.
Yeah.
There's a tab that says endorsements, and it was everything that I could, and more that I could have imagined or wanted. And it's beautiful. It is gold to me. It is more than gold. It's just, if I didn't have that, it would be, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm telling a story of someone that is so precious to her people and precious to our country. And you asked about women. Women all across America have heard about this woman. There are more statues of her than any woman in American history. Yes. And her story is unknown. We know that she went on the Lewis and Clark expedition. We know that she carried a baby, We know that she helped them, but what is her story? Her
Yeah.
spirit?
Yeah.
How? She was a person. So.
Because you just said, if I hadn't had that, the endorsement, what would you have done if they wouldn't have given you? Let's play. Let me be devil's advocate.
What if? I would still be trying probably to get it. I would go and share with them my heart, which I did, but
Yeah.
even more so, I would never give up. I would never give up. How could I even make it into a movie without that?
Yeah.
It's not my place to do that. And I am just so grateful and thankful for that because, I got that endorsement in, I think it was 2014.
Mm-hmm.
That was 9 years ago, and I'm still trying to get this movie made.
Yeah.
Because it's a big movie.
Yeah.
It's a lot of funding, and it's a lot involved. It's epic.
Yeah.
But we got the endorsement way before, so that was good.
Yeah. Okay. When do you think the movie will be released?
Well, I wish I knew, but I don't. But we're in the working stage of production. Development is the first phase, and we have been in that for a while. But we are working with some incredible, wonderful people now, and I would really love to be able to mention them. Of course, we're still looking for funding. That's an ongoing quest. But I wanted to recognize our producers. I'm so grateful for them and all that they have helped to move this project along. The first one is Martin Noosa Productions. Martin Noosa, he's from Gibraltar, and he's such a wonderful friend, like-hearted person, and he is our senior producer. I recently added Templegate Films. They're a great company. They do a lot of projects, and Rick Ballantyne is the producer for Windcatcher, Sacajawea, and he also is a composer, a really incredible composer. I'm excited to hear his music. Mark Rickerby is also from Templegate. He's a producer and also going to be taking care of distribution. And then Tennille Ulm, she's also a co-producer working in the casting department. And she is a Native American consultant as well. Then we have a company called John Scott Productions. They've been around for a while. He's from Canada, John Scott, and he's a producer, but he also does stunts, and he's the head wrangler. And I met him a few years ago when we were going to film in Canada, and he's just stayed on the project, and he's really rooting for us to get this going. And then with our company, Broken Hand Productions, we've had a team of people on for a long time. And Karen Ochoa, she's a director, producer, and script consultant. She helped me to formulate the script into a production script. And she's a wonderful, incredible visionary. We have Jane Myers, who's a producer and Native consultant. She's also Native American. Susan Funk, who's a co-producer working with Tennille in casting. And she's also a Native American consultant. She's of the Flathead Nation, which was one of the tribes that they came across along this path. Ron Weisberg is a co-producer, and also Leo Airwhite. He is an associate producer, and he is our Shoshoni consultant, the one that gave the recommendation, and he has been on the project for years and years. So there are so many more. You can go to imdb.com and put in Sacajawea the Windcatcher, and you can see all the people involved and all the people that we thank for their contributions just out of love, and just would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, okay. I will definitely look it up. But when is the movie due?
I'm hoping at least over the next 2 years.
Okay.
I'm hoping. But it takes such a long time. And it's a huge movie.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of preparation, costumes and boats and canoes and hundreds of Native Americans in the different tribes that we meet, that we focus on in the story. So you can follow at sacagaweathemovie.com and go to our blog, follow that, our next steps. And we are on Facebook. And so we have a lot of information out there. Timetable is, we try to keep everyone updated on where we're at. So we have, a wonderful team of people that are just ready, and we're talking to people at this moment. So
yeah. Personally, I cannot wait to see the movie.
I cannot wait to have it made.
Yeah. And also because we talked before, and okay, so you mentioned the names of the people, Clark, Lewis, Jane, but you and Sacajawea herself was called Janie during the expedition. But there were also other stories, right?
Yes. Well, and I think the one that I couldn't remember the name last time.
Yeah.
Well, just the fact that my friends in high school were Cliff Lewis, John Clark, and Jane Scott. So the names are very important. Names, places, cloud formations, rock formations. I mean, there are so many, as I've noticed over these years, that have come into my path. But names are extremely important. So in about, I think it was 2018, I realized that in 1905, the suffragettes, the women that wanted the vote, and the women, were very powerful women at that time for women's rights and freedoms. They adopted Sacajawea as their icon. And I didn't realize that until 2018. And I was, wow. I thought, 1905.
Yeah.
And it started to think about, there has to be something in this that is linear with her story. So I did some investigating into this woman that was leading this in the Portland, Oregon area in 1905. And I thought, I thought she had a insight into Sacagawea's spiritual. There was an element here that was driving this woman. Her name was Abigail Duniway.
Okay.
Was driving her she knew she had to get the funding for a statue of Sacagawea in Portland, Oregon. Okay. This was what she was trying to do. And she had an article in the newspaper in Portland. And I was just blown away when I read the title of the article. It was, "She Flies with Her Own Wings." And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I felt that same wind catcher on eagle's wings. The whole thing was one of the biggest things that came to me as I was trying to write this, and the eagle in the window. And and so now she's got this article in 1905 that said she flies with her own wings. And it was an article about Sacajawea. And I'm thinking, okay, we've got Lewis and Clark starting their expedition in 1803. They meet Sacajawea in 1805. Abigail and the suffragettes start in 1903, and she's trying to get the statue in 1905. I start Sacajawea, the Windcatcher, in 2003, and in 2005, I'm writing this story, getting out of the way, trying to bring together and find her voice in this story. And I'm thinking, okay, there has to be a name thing here. So I'm looking up Abigail Duniway, and I looked some more history about her and everything. And I'm sure there has to be something. And my eyes fell on her lineage, where she came from, her family, and her full name. And her full name was Abigail Jane Scott Duniway.
Oh my.
which was the name of my girlfriend, my friend in
Yeah.
Portland, Jane Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, it's, it was too much. I just like had tears came to my eyes because
Yeah.
I think, is there something moving this? And I'm not worried. I know it's going to be made in the effort and the spiritual elements beyond my life. It's not about me in any way. She is moving and her story needs to be told. And it wasn't till later when I went down to LA, I went on my own sojourn trying to get this made. And I was down there for 2 years, but it was my own emptying out of me and just filling up with something so powerful about oneness and love and unity and respect for the earth and one another. This was what I was having to learn aside from Sacajawea. And then I realized that is the missing element in her story. We have her people, the Lewis and Clark journey, the Native Americans, the respect and all of that. But the element with the eagles and the birds and the trees and the rocks and the clouds is oneness, unity, love, respect for the earth and one another. That was the part that I had to learn. That's why it has taken so long to get to this place. And now we have her story through her eyes. The spiritual part was the final touch. And I believe that we're ready. We're ready.
Yes, you are. Because for our listeners, I had the amazing honor to to read the script. It's an amazing script. It's an amazing story. And as I mentioned before, while I was reading the script, I saw this whole movie passing by. So I really cannot wait for the movie, to watch the movie. Yeah. Well, that is another a question I want to ask you, because you told us why this is all so very important to you. But you also said that you felt the need to protect the script. You felt the need to protect the story because you wanted it to be her story. So why did you feel the urge to protect the script?
Well, partly, it began when I went to with her people. And I told them that I would never sell this story, that I would be the one that would make sure that the history was true. The authenticity of the story was there. The actual Native Americans playing Native American parts, and to make it respectful of her people. And one thing that I discovered while I was writing it was there are so many differing opinions about Sacajawea, and some people didn't like her, some people claimed her, some people thought of her this way. There was controversy with her name. Sacagawea was the name that the Hidatsa gave her, meaning bird woman. Sacajawea was a Shoshoni name that was similar to Sacagawea, and it meant boat pusher.
Yeah.
And somehow all of that has kind of come together to where it's Sacajawea, but the meaning has gotten more toward the bird woman way. So that's what I use. I respected her people and used Sacajawea in the story. But when the Hidatsa gives her name in the story, it's Sacagawea, because I respect that too. And I am not here to start a fight. And that was really what I wanted to make sure that the elements in this story, and it's very deliberate, was there to create respect and honoring her life, not her death, not because there's controversy about that too, when she died. And I'm not here to get into any conflicts about that or fighting. It's just this beautiful soul that lived.
Yeah.
Her story is so powerful and relevant for today. the respect that women have had all along with the suffragettes and all the respect that we have today, her warrior woman spirit, her passion in a time when women had no rights. She was respected and honored, and we must lift her up. And that is why I must protect the script, because I don't want her turned into an Indian princess or this or, something that's not. She was real. She was vibrant. She had a mind of her own.
Yeah.
And she stood up for herself.
Yeah.
As indicated in the journals. And so she deserves to have her story told in the right way and with the respect that she commands.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So Jane, thank you. Thank you very much for the honor of having you at my show. I think that's my belief, my personal opinion. I think you are a remarkable woman with a remarkable story about a remarkable young girl.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because Sacajawea was not the only Native American girl that was taken, that was abducted. And you mentioned that this still happens every day.
Yes.
Still.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is more like a general question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to say to women who have been the victim of abduction, abuse, violence against women? And what would you like to say to them? And what do you think Sacajawea would like to say to them?
Well, I think that Sacajawea, her story, brings hope to women. Just even though it was from the 1800s, there's so much that she endured, but she kept moving forward. She kept on, and even through disappointment and heartache. And so I think that's why one of the reasons this story is so timely, to bring awareness about this terrible situation, problem happening with Indigenous women, even around the world. I'm so blessed to be aligned with Growing Seeds Worldwide Foundation in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
and Monique Wingard, and just having them on board, and women, with the awareness of women around the world, and PASA Tree of Life, the other nonprofit that we're aligned with, and what they do to help Indigenous women, Native American women across the United States. And so we've made an effort to create a group, Warrior Woman Spirit, where women can go and tell their stories and help other women. And I hope that that's one thing that I'm hoping that women will do from hearing this, because if you have a story, we want to tell it, because other women can learn from it and feel empowered by those stories. So Sacajawea, she was one of them. And some women even today are being murdered too. So it's a big problem. But who else would be heading this but Sacajawea? This movement to bring awareness and do something.
Yeah.
So that is one of our main focuses as we move on here.
Yeah. So you invite women to tell their stories. If they hear this episode and they want to share their story with you, how can they reach you? How can they reach out to you?
The website is warriorwomanspirit.com, and there's a contact form there. That's the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. And let us know that you have a story.
Yeah.
And we will contact you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just humbled that you asked me. I really appreciate you and all that you do for women. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing this remarkable story about this remarkable young woman, and for explaining to us why you feel the need to share her story with the world. If you are out there listening and you feel like you also have a story to share, please reach out to Jane at www.warriorwomanspirit.com. Remember, everyone has a story, and yours is worth listening to. In the next episode, I'm having a conversation with Miriam Lenswood, who, at 22 years old, gave up her old material life to live in the wilderness of New Zealand for 7 years with her now husband Peter. Miriam, now 40 and back living in Europe, shares her incredible story with us. Thank you all for listening. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.